Welcome to the RJI Futures Lab, where we help you make your organization more innovative. I'm Ruben Stern. This week, the role of product managers in newsrooms and how complex stories might be written by computers. Increasingly, news organizations are relying on product managers to help them respond to new opportunities and user behaviors. The Futures Lab's Katie Mersman shows us how this role adds value for newsrooms.
Like many digital organizations, Vox Media brought the idea of product managers into journalism. Different from a traditional project manager, their primary responsibility is to bring together teams of people from editorial and programming roles to work together to develop new internal tools and external products.
My job is to help facilitate all the ideas that are coming in and make sure that we are being as efficient and productive as possible. It's not your job to be the manager of this team. As a product manager, you should be fostering innovation within your team and making sure that to trust your team with their ideas and their voices.
At Vox, product managers are communicators first and foremost. Their job is to listen and facilitate discussion to make their teams work more smoothly. Ultimately, their job is to sort through the team's priorities and make sure the end result is on target.
My nightmare is to put out a product that we are all excited about and then giving it to editorial and they're like, but that's not how we work at all, you know? A big role for a product manager should be that they can connect with our users, whether it's, the editorial staff or our readers, just getting a good understanding of what people actually need.
People who have an understanding of putting together a large project and making sure that all of the pieces can be threaded together is really important. I think for newsrooms, some of the people who've transitioned from newsroom jobs into more of a product management job are the people who can spot a hole and figure out how to bring the people together to fill that hole. The really talented ones are the ones that can have a holistic view of a product and think about what it will take to really build out and execute on delivering this product to users.
But it's not just digital startups bringing product managers into the newsroom. The Washington Post has added product managers as well, where they advocate for the user in the development process.
You usually at a project start out some problem you're trying to solve. And I think as you move along, sometimes you risk veering off in directions that don't actually solve the problem. So a product manager is really, they're the voice of the user. So they're always the one saying, does this thing that we're talking about actually make sense for what these users need? Also, during development and post-launch, product is also the one who's really looking at the data saying, are our load times fast enough? Are people engaging with the parts of the projects that we thought they would? Or are there things that maybe aren't going over as well as we thought? And what could we do to make those better?
Familiarity with the newsroom's audience and goals is important for product managers, and people already working there can make a natural shift into product management.
For, smaller publications, if they're looking for who their potential product managers are, I would look at some of the digital staff that you may have in your newsroom because they may be your potential next product managers. Now we have our product managers, our engineers, they all sit in the newsroom. We're sitting side by side with the editors who are working on the projects that we're also working on. So I think that integration is easier when it's not some nameless, faceless engineering department, right? It's the person who you see sitting next to you.
Initially a producer in the newsroom, Ingram is now the product manager of the Washington Post's iOS apps, where she helps manage frequent development and growth of the product. For the Futures Lab, this is Katie Mersman.
Vox Media recently created a special product team called Alpha. Their mission is to develop prototypes for lots of smaller projects in collaboration with editors from across the company's newsrooms. So far, automation has been used to generate stories based on finite sets of data. But what if computers could write more complex stories or even cover breaking news? The Futures Lab's Berkeley Lovelace explains how the technology is evolving.
In Los Angeles, NBC4 covered a vehicle pursuit that began during the late evening and ended with a crash. The unknown driver fled and police soon captured them. David Caswell is working to generate these kinds of stories with automate technologies like Wordsmith.
You have to recognize things that are precursors to the chase or consequences of the chase, and then the template can pick that up and work with it. I think that there's a lot of potential to use that for state government stories too.
Wordsmith is already being used to generate finance and sports stories at AP. Those stories typically have data to work with, but breaking news or political stories are harder to generate because the variation between stories are greater.
The biggest limitation to our technology is typically the data that we have to work with. So if there is structured data, for example, a spreadsheet of sports statistics, we can create very nuanced, very robust stories about that data, assuming we have enough to work with.
Caswell recorded these complex stories as data and created templates.
And that is what enables us to work to transform that into the structure necessary to write these automated stories.
He says the challenge is noticing which stories are similar enough to squeeze into a standardized format, but there's a limit.
There comes a point when stories are just too different to build a standardized template around.
Caswell says this technology is in the early stages and has the potential to generate stories in different areas. For example, medical stories where a person is taken to an emergency room. For the Futures Lab, this is Berkeley Lovelace.
A company called Narrative Science offers similar technology. You'll find more information along with this video. And that's it for this report from the RJI Futures Lab. I'm Ruben Stern. We'll see you in the future.